Hello, this is Stacey Sims and I am going to demonstrate how to alter the sample risk assessments that have been developed by our team of technical officers so that you can use it to submit your own risk assessment for your self-directed project. Now, a risk assessment is a process where you can identify hazards and risk factors that have the potential to cause harm and determine appropriate ways to eliminate the hazard or control the risk when the hazard cannot be eliminated. So the example that I'm going to use today is the sample risk assessment for oil painting at home. Now in this form there are a few things that you will need to alter, for example your location. This is where you will be completing the work activity. So if you are if you are oil painting in a domestic space, what is that location? So your home, and the specific location is your actual home address, and then where are you going to be working? Are you working outside in the garden or in the garage? Just write that in there. Now for the risk assessment, the purpose is for teaching, so this is part of your a subject you are enrolled in. In process flow, the developer is you, so you need to replace whatever the sample name that has been provided with your name and student number. And the approver is your lecturer, so that could be both your group lecturer and a specialist in the area that you're working in, who you've been consulting with. So you can have one or two or more approvers. It just depends on who you've been talking to about what you're working on. Referenced documentation is basically these are the forms where we gather all of the information in the next area of the form. So in our assessment of hazards, there are a couple of areas to this form. So we need to describe the hazard, so whatever has the potential to cause injury or damage to property or the environment. Then list the current controls, so what is in place today that controls the risk, and list any control measures that have already been implemented. So to determine what the hazards are associated with working with painting medium, the one that we've listed as an example is paint medium refined linseed oil, and the oil paints are also another one that has been listed. So up here, what we have included in our reference documentation are these are other documents not included in these samples. They are safety data sheets for both of those materials. So a safety data sheet for the Art Spectrum oil colours, that's the brand of oil colours that we are using for this example, and the safety data sheet for the Art Spectrum refined linseed oil. Linseed oil and oil colours do come from a range of suppliers, so whatever the brand is of the product that you're using, you do need to actually find the applicable safety data sheet. So if you are working with Winsor & Newton, you need to replace this safety data sheet for the Art Spectrum oil colours with the one provided by Winsor & Newton. The reason you need to do that is when you start describing the hazards, we actually get that information from those safety data sheets. So the safety data sheets that we have provided in this example for the first one is the refined linseed oil. I'm just going to open that up. So if you have a read through this safety data sheet that is available on Moodle, you'll see there are some headings here, like for example hazard identification. It actually lists all of the hazards that are associated with using this product. So for example, if it comes in contact with your eyes, it lets you know that you can wash them out immediately. Same for if you ingest it for any reasons. What am I looking for? Specific hazards. It's a combustible material, so that means that it can ignite. And then there are some tips on, it explains the handling and storage of that equipment as well. So storing in a dry, cool place and well ventilated area. So have a read through that, and this is where you can glean the information to fill out your form. So read through it, write down the information so that it is applicable for this form and an appropriate description of a control that you've set in place for the hazards mentioned in the safety data sheet. So for the painting medium, it is combustible and may cause eye or skin irritation. So that's a description of a hazard that we found listed in the safety data sheet. And then the current control, it's quite lengthy, but it covers storing in a cool, dry place, well ventilated, out of direct sunlight, store away from a source of heat. It also goes on to describe how you can actually keep the container. So if you live with other people, if it's roommates or kids or anything like that, then I think it would be a good idea to store those containers out of reach and clearly label them with whatever they contain. And then we've just done the same for the oil paints and just taken information from the safety data sheet. So this is the safety data sheet for Art Spectrum oil colours, and rewritten it so that it is appropriate for this form. So once you have written down all of the description of the hazard and implemented any current controls, you need to list the control type. So what is the type of control that you have implemented to manage that risk? So in this case, we're isolating where we are going to be storing and using the medium, and we're going to use personal protective equipment, so wearing gloves, eye protection, to ensure that we limit any exposure that could cause harm. With your risk rating, with the current controls in place, working out how high or low of a risk using this will pose. The way that we work that out is C is for consequence, L is for likelihood, and R equals the risk. So just so that makes a little bit more sense, I'm going to come down to our risk matrix here. So our risk matrix, our consequences are minor, moderate, major, or severe, and these consequences are defined over here on the left. So minor is injury to report, no treatment, up to severe. So severe is death or extensive injuries. And then our likelihood: unlikely, possible, likely, or almost certain. Unlikely may occur but probably never will, and almost certain is expected to occur in most circumstances. So we just line up those two options. So the likelihood of it happening is unlikely, and then the consequence of getting linseed oil in your eye might be moderate, so our risk would be low. And then we do that for each of the hazards that we have listed. So we work out what the risk rating is. Now, if you include any risk controls, so we've included a couple of extra risk controls here that you will need to implement yourself. So with these examples, working outside to achieve best ventilation and purchase or borrow equipment to enable this, such as an easel, that is something that you will need to implement. So because that is the case, then you need to update the form with your name for the person responsible for ensuring these additional controls are actioned. And then the target date is, well, the sooner the better. Basically, give yourself a deadline for when you need to start working outside, or ensure that you've got someone lined up to be around while you're working, so you're never working alone. And then the date you're completed, if this is already completed on the day that you're filling out the form, then you just write whatever date is applicable. Okay, so hopefully that helps you navigate these forms with a little more ease. If you are still, if you come up against any roadblocks and you're not sure of what to do, please contact technical staff and we can help you work through these forms. Otherwise, happy risk assessing at home.